Hi, I'm Mason Marangella from Vertex Effects. Some of you may know me from my YouTube channel where I'm known as the Rig Doctor. Today I'm going to be taking you through 5 pedal board upgrades that every guitar and bass player needs. First things first, to have a great pedal board, you're always going to need to have an isolated power supply, and I've chosen 3 of my favorites. The classic that everybody knows and loves is, of course, the Voodoo Lab Pedal Power 2. This is what's called a linear analog supply. It uses a toroidal transformer, and it isolates every single one of these outputs. And why isolated outputs are important is because it makes sure that every single pedal that it's connected to kind of has its own island of power. So it's not going to influence or be influenced by any of the other pedals that are connected to this supply. Another one that I really like is made by True Tone. It is the One Spot CS6, and they also have larger power supplies with the CS7 and the CS12. If you have more pedals, you can check those out. And these are also isolated power supplies, and this is a little bit different. Instead of being a toroidal, linear-based analog supply like the Voodoo Lab, this is a switching power supply, and it uses something called high frequency to isolate all these outputs. And this is really cool because this allows you to actually use this power supply in any country in the world. So if you're on tour and you're going to Japan, you're going to Europe, you can plug in this supply and it's going to work the same everywhere in the world. Now, if you really want to splurge and get one of the best power supplies on the market, I highly recommend the Strymon Zuma. Now, this is also a switching power supply like the True Tone, and it's completely isolated and dead quiet. But the thing I really like about it is every single one of these outputs offers 500 milliamps, which can power almost any pedal out there. And if you weren't able to power something off of 500 milliamps, you can also ask your Sweetwater sales engineer to get you either a voltage doubler to increase the voltage or a current doubler to increase the current so that you can get enough juice out of this thing to power any pedal that's out there. The second thing that you need to have on your rig in order to maximize it in getting the most out of this power supply is you want to use a high quality shielded DC power cable. Now, the reason that you want shielded, just like this is right here, and I've separated the shield and the hot on this power cable that's made by Voodoo Lab, the reason why you want to do this is you want to make sure that your DC power cable is set up to reject noise as much as possible. Most of the companies that are making DC power cables are just basically taking 2 of the exact same conductor. They might color code one red and one black, and they don't actually have a shield that wraps around the entire DC power cable. And Voodoo Lab is one of the few that does this, and this is available right here at Sweetwater in a variety of lengths, so you can actually just tailor the length that you need to the actual size that's needed to reach your pedal on your pedal board. A really cheap, inexpensive upgrade that really helps maximize what you're already doing in investing in a high-quality power supply like those I mentioned before. For the third thing, I really think that you should be investing in a high-quality patch cable. These are the interconnectors that go between each one of your pedals on your pedal board, and I've brought a few different ones that I really like. The first one is the one I'm holding here that's made by Ernie Ball. It's a nice white color if you want to have white, but if you want to have something that kind of blends in more with maybe your black pedal train or whatever other surface you might use, MXR also makes an excellent one. These are both soldered and really high quality cables. They put on some really nice thick heat shrink here, and really they address the primary issue with a lot of the patch cables in that they put heat shrink in the right place that really isolates lateral movement, because movement is the enemy of a quality patch cable connection, and they do a great job at making sure that these are rock solid. If you're feeling really ambitious and you want to try your hand at soldering, Sweetwater has you covered there too. They have one of my favorite bulk cables, which is the Mogami 2524. This has been something that's been used by rig builders for decades, from guys like Dave Friedman, Robert Bradshaw, and many, many more. And the cool thing too is that they provide the connectors here as well as part of the Sweetwater catalog. They have stuff from Switchcraft, they have stuff from Proco, and many other great manufacturers. And we're gonna link a few of these below so that you can see some of my favorites if you decide that you wanna take this on and try your hand with a soldering iron to solder up some really high quality patch cables for a really good price. The fourth thing that you really want to invest in for your pedal board to maximize it is getting a high quality shielded instrument cable. And if you're going to invest in one of them, you really want to get a good quality going from your guitar into your pedal board. So these are some of my favorites that are here. We have the Mogami Platinum. This is an excellent, excellent cable. Sounds great, and it even has a switching end on it, which is silent. So when you unplug from your guitar, it doesn't make any noise whatsoever. You don't get that popping sound or that open loop sound when you have the kind of the guitar cable rumbling around. This is a really great way to have great tone and keep it silent when you're on a stage, and you don't want any embarrassing moments when you have all this noise of a disconnected cable. Another cable that I love that's a little brighter sounding than the Mogami and still beautiful and articulate is the Astrope cable. I really love how these sound. I really love, like on Strats and Tellies, when you want to get that really beautiful strident clean tone. This is definitely the cable that I'm going to be reaching for going into the input of my pedal board. Lastly, if you're feeling ambitious as a DIYer, just like how we talked about on the patch cables, you can make your own instrument cables going into your pedal board. I have some Lava Soar right here, which is a really great sounding cable, and you can buy the same sorts of connectors that I talked about before. We have ones made by Neutrik, Switchcraft, and I think that you could definitely go with something kind of more like what we saw on this Mogami, where they're using a Neutrik end, kind of these black ends with the gold tips. This would be something that would be an ideal fit if you wanted to have a real robust connection to solder to the Lava Soar. And again, this is all going to be linked for you below, so you can find my exact recommended pairings between this and which the associated connector would be. Now last, our fifth thing, and last but not least on this, because this is one of the most important things that is going to be on your pedal board, is using a high quality dual buffer. And let me tell you that not all buffers are created equally. Most buffers are actually not meeting the requirements for signal conditioning in order to keep things neutral. You want to look for a specification that says that the buffer input impedance, that means when you plug into it, the impedance of the buffer is at 1 meg. Sometimes that's abbreviated as just the number 1 and an M. And then the output impedance when you go out of the buffer should be somewhere between 80 ohms and about 150 ohms. So you're looking for that specification. Some people mix up on the end. Instead of saying 80 ohms or 150 ohms, they think it's 150K or 80K ohms. That would be too high. That would be, 100 times higher, or 10 times higher rather, than 100 ohms. So you want to make sure that you're looking for that specification. And this Mesa Boogie buffer fits the bill. It's got a 1 meg input impedance, and it's got about 150 ohm output impedance, meets the bill there. And then it also has a second buffer when you're coming back into it from your pedal board, which has the same exact input and output impedance. So you're actually buffering twice. You're buffering before you go into your pedal board, then you're going through your pedals with a nice buffered signal, and then at the end of the pedal board, you're coming back to it, and then sending a nice buffered signal back to your amp. Now, why is it important to have 2 buffers instead of 1? You might be asking yourself. Well, the critical thing with buffers is that anytime you turn on a pedal after your high quality input buffer, that pedal that's turned on is now your buffer from that point forward, whether it's a true bypass pedal or not. So what this allows you to do is not rely on any one pedal after your good input buffer to have to drive a line too far down your pedal board before you come back to a really high quality buffer to drive that long line back to your amp, because the longest individual signal line that we have in our entire pedal board is typically that last cable that's taking our pedal board all the way back to the amp. So this ensures that it does it with fidelity, and it gets that same tone as what you would get if you just took your guitar and you plugged it directly into your amplifier with nothing in between. This will allow you to recreate that sound, even though you might be running through 10, 12, 15 pedals. And on top of it, it also has a boost that you can engage, and you can adjust how much output you want. That's at the end of the circuit, so it happens at the output stage. And then it also has a tuner out, so you can put your tuner in there and just remove one more pedal from your signal path, so you just have a little bit less to run through with all your patch cables. Now, bonus round, if you really want to go crazy and you want to make sure that your pedals are absolutely rock solid and that they can't be removed from your pedal board unless you really want them to be, I highly recommend getting yourself some 3M Dual Lock. This stuff is indestructible, and once it goes down on your pedals, you might need to use a upholstery crowbar or something to pop those pedals off, because this is going to hold it down really well. It's very resistant to humidity and heat. You're not going to lose any pedals from your pedal board as you're transporting it internationally, traveling, or from gig to gig. So again, I'm Mason Marangella from Vertex Effects, aka the Rig Doctor. I hope these tips you found helpful and useful in helping you implement into your rig. If you have any questions, please be sure to put those in the comments, and I'll be sure that me and my team chime in there if there is anything that you need specific help with. And again, be sure to check out all those links. Everything I talked about today is linked there, and you can talk to your Sweetwater sales engineer about these very products if you are interested. Thank you again. See you next time.